It's 1 o'clock. This is all new to me, so perhaps you can tell me on the technical side of things if we're live. Thank you very much. I'm getting confirmation that we're live. This is really exciting. This is our first meeting of the London Police Services Board at City Council chambers, and we're getting used to the technology here. If we're not perfect today, councillors, you're expected to be perfect today because you're used to these chairs and this technology, but if the rest of us aren't quite perfect today, I think you'll forgive us, and we'll try to get better at this kind of stuff in the future. Making this move was not easy. There were a lot of details that went on in the background, and I think I'd be remiss if I didn't express my appreciation to our administrator, Jennifer Foster, for making things happen today from our end of things. And I know there are many people inside the police service who helped her with that from a technical perspective, and also to Linda Rowe here at the City of London, and all the people who backed her up, including council members who are here today to make this possible. So my thanks to them. A couple of things. I like to mention a few things at the beginning of the meeting that might be noteworthy, and one that comes to mind is a very special session that was put on by Deputy Chief Longworth in partnership with the OPP and other community agencies last night. And I know that one of the goals of that is just to get the news out on the topic that you dealt with last night, Deputy Chief. So perhaps I'll give you a couple of minutes to just tell us how things went last night for the purposes of this meeting.
You have it.
Does that work? Okay, we're on. Yeah, it was a good experience. It was a well-attended meeting. There was probably a little over 100 people there that came out to hear what we had to say, and we had presentations from myself, from a member of the OPP, from the health unit, and from Thames Valley Addiction Services. So the topic was all about opioids. The topic was dealing with fentanyl and the dangers and the risks it posed to the community. We also talked about the approach that we as a community need to take as far as harm reduction, treatment, prevention, and of course the law enforcement piece and the importance of each one of those. So it was well attended. There was a diverse collection of people. I saw parents that seemed to be there with their teenagers. We had people from all walks of life there. We had some questions and answers, very good questions, and demonstrated that people in the community are concerned about this issue. So overall it was good. We got some good media attention. So thankful to all the partners who attended to assist us.
Thank you, Deputy Chief. A great example, I think, of the way police service and agencies in this community work together on proactive initiatives. I'm going to move forward then with this meeting and ask if there are any disclosures of interest from board members. None being seen. I'm checking the sight lines here. They're not as, they're a little different than I'm used to. Thank you very much. It is a little more difficult. My sympathies. I'm going to look to item number 3, introduction and addendum of new items of business. Jennifer, I don't believe you had any. I'm sorry. She reminds me that there are the minutes of the public portion of the special meeting from December 21st that we need to add under other business. And I will add one more and then look for a motion to adopt those. Or maybe I shouldn't even ask for your permission. I just wanted to take the opportunity, since this is my last meeting as board chair, to say a few words of thanks at the end. So with your permission, thank you, Susan. Oh, thank you for nodding that both of those items you're willing to add. Thank you very much. Any opposed to adding those two things? No, thank you very much. So I'll move on to item number 4, which is the ratification of an e-vote regarding an interim vice chair. As members know, on December 22nd, we had a motion to appoint Ms. Toth as the interim vice chair of the board, and I'll just look for a motion to ratify that. Thank you very much. None opposed to that. And so I would express my thanks. It allowed me to actually go on a holiday and turn off the technology for a week out west. So thank you, Ms. Toth, for handling that for me. Very much appreciated. So we're on to item number 5. As board members know, my 8-year term on this board comes to an end in April. So, and I've spent 3 very enjoyable years as chair. And as our policy suggests, this is the time of year when we look for an election of a new chair and vice chair for 2018. And I'll look for a motion from members, volunteers from members to fulfill those roles. Councillor?
I'm prepared to put my name in as chair for the London Police Service Board.
Thank you, Councillor. Position is, yes, Mayor?
Just looking if you need seconders for that.
Yes, we should probably do them separately, okay? Maybe, but not sure if I should ask you to make a motion for yourself. I think it's usually, I think the way the policy reads, it's nominations. So do I have anyone who would like to then nominate Councillor Salee? Thank you. Mayor, seconder for that? I see Councillor Helmer. All in favor? Perhaps we should do this officially to vote in favor of that. Thank you. And now I'll look for names for vice chair. I see a couple of hands here. Council, would you like to make a motion?
I was going to nominate someone as you suggested.
Yes.
I was going to nominate Susan Toth.
Okay. Seconder? Councillor Helmer, I see a hand. Ms. Toth, are you willing to stand for that office? Yes. Thank you very much. So I'll look for a vote in favor of that. Okay, there's a very big smile on my face. I'm feeling a great sense of relief, or at least I will in about an hour from now, to hand over that responsibility. In the meantime, let's move on with the agenda, and I'll carry on until the end of this meeting, and perhaps till the signing of the documents that come out of this meeting today. Thank you very much for letting your names stand. It's an important role for the community.
Enjoy past, Chair.
Thanks. So I'll move on to item number 6 then, which is the minutes of the December 14th, 2017 meeting of the public meeting minutes. Motion to move those, Councillor Salee. Seconder for those, to receive those. Thank you, Councillor Helmer. Any opposed? Discussion? No, thank you, Jennifer. Those removed. Item number 7, to receive the Human Resources Report from Administration. Motion to receive those. Yes, Councillor Salee, seconded by Ms. Toth. Any opposed? Carried, Jen. Item number 8, to receive a new LPS organizational chart. I'll look for a motion to receive that. I think it's contained in your binders.
Can I hold on for a second? There's an issue with the vote on the minutes because Mr. Homer was not here.
Sorry about that.
December.
I'd like to say it's the first time I've done it today, but it isn't. Thank you.
Sorry, I think we've had some conference, and I think Councillor Helmer must have made a motion to accept some of the minutes when he wasn't there. Is that the, okay?
He was there, just not part of the team.
Okay, so, all right, yes, he was in attendance, yeah, but it's not part of the team. So we have a willing substitute. The mayor is willing to second those motions. That, okay, thank you, good catch.
Always cleaning up after James.
I see there are dynamics sitting around this table that I'm not aware of. Okay, I think we are now on to the organizational chart. Councillor Helmer, would you like to move the receipt of those? I think you're here today, thank you. A seconder for those, that. Ms. Toth, any opposed to receiving that new organizational chart? Very helpful. And I would note, just for public edification, that one of the important things on that chart, although I'm not sure if the names, I can't remember which names are mentioned on this specific one, is that Deputy Chief Williams is now Deputy Chief of Operations, and Deputy Chief Longworth is now Deputy Chief of Administration. Those roles were essentially flipped in terms of the way they've been for the last couple of years. I think I'm on to number 9 now. The OAPSB, the Ontario Association of Police Service Boards, has requested a contribution to obtain legal services as a group regarding Bill 175, the Safer Ontario Act 2017. And at some point, Ms. Toth and Mayor Brown were asked to take a look for our board at those at that new legislation, pending legislation, and provide feedback. So I think I'll look to Ms. Toth for her opinion about whether or not this would be a good thing for us to contribute to.
I'm going to forget to do that. Yes, thank you, Chair. So there's a couple things that I think we should maybe separate out in terms of this request. And the first is that for those of you who aren't aware, this request essentially asks boards to provide into a pool of funds to retain legal counsel to review the Safer Ontario Act, Bill 175, which is essentially going to completely revamp the Police Services Act. I think it's a good idea. It's an efficient use of pooling all our resources to hire outside legal counsel, one person to do a comprehensive review. I do also think that on top of that, there's opportunities for us as an individual board to take a look at the Safer Ontario Act ourselves from a London perspective as well. And I believe, Councillor Salee, that maybe I'll pass it over to you right now because you had a suggestion on how we can do that. And then after that, perhaps I would happily move to put in $2,000 towards this pool to seek legal counsel on the act.
Thank you. I'll look to your microphone to go off.
Yep.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I was hoping to propose in relation to this. I did have an opportunity last minute to speak to the province, and there's some opportunities for us to make submissions, whether written or in person. I do have some of the dates. The deadline is time sensitive, so that's why I couldn't wait to the next agenda because it's Friday, February 16th, which gives us an opportunity to go before the provincial committee that's hearing on this. And I think it'd be prudent for us. And I wanted to suggest maybe if two of our members, and I know I did talk to them real briefly before this, Councillor Helmer and Susan Toth, to be the members to kind of move forward and kind of bring our perspective, the London Police Service Board, and work with this board to advocate on our positions and what we think is important. And of course, to move that forward, and of course as well, to have the board support it, whatever, as far as the travels, the expenses related to that, so that they're able to advocate on our behalf to bring the London perspective, because I do feel at times, sometimes with some of these bills and opportunities, it becomes Toronto-centric, and sometimes London lens isn't part of it, and I think it's important, and we know these things don't open up very often, and I don't want it to be a missed opportunity, so I wanted to put that forward as a motion.
So I think I have two motions on the table. I have one to contribute $2,000 to a shared expense for our Ontario Association. Mayor, you're willing to second that? So maybe I'll have a vote on that one and then I'll get back to yours, Councillor, if that's okay. Sorry, Councillor Helmer, on that point, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, I'm interested to know, I think I support the idea of pooling some funds and having a legal review. I'm wondering about the timing, given the sort of window of opportunity that we have to provide feedback to the province. There's a reference here in the letter from the OAPSB that they think it's going to be in February, and then Councillor Slee saying, well, it seems like it's the 16th of February, which is, you know, a month from now. So do we think we're going to have the legal work done and to us in advance of that? Will we be able to benefit from that information before the committee making presentations?
I wonder if we could make the motion conditional upon communication with the OAPSB and getting some assurances that the work would be done in time for these meetings that Councillor Salee is speaking about. Would that satisfy your concerns?
Well, I think that it's helpful for us to have the information regardless of how soon we get it. I just think it would be better if we had it in advance, and I wondered if we knew anything about the timing. If we don't, I think I'm still willing to support it now, and then we'll see about the timing.
Okay.
I imagine it's not something that's going to be easily done, and I'm not sure it'll be done by February 16th, but.
Ms. Toth, do you know anything else about it?
I don't. I'd actually asked, because the request came in initially asking for these funds. I believe they had a deadline of December, some date in December. And I had emailed saying, is it all right if we wait until the January meeting before we let you know? I got a response and they said, yep, lots of people are still meeting with their boards in January to provide these funds. But I don't know, they've already retained somebody. I presume that they probably already started to some extent on the work, but we can certainly send an email and just inquire when we can expect to have the opinion.
So perhaps the motion could be to support it and encourage them to the extent possible to have that feedback or whatever feedback they have available on that legal consultation before these meetings. I'm sure they're more than aware of them as well. But thank you, by the way, Councillor Salee, for that homework on that. Much appreciated. So shall I call the vote on the motion for the $2,000 support? Any in favor of it? Having to look in all kinds of directions. Thank you. We don't have your electronic voting going on here as you usually do.
Thank goodness.
Thanks very much for that. And now I'm going to circle back, Councillor Salee, to the motion you had, which was, I think, for the board to support Councillor Helmer and Ms. Toth going to this meeting on the date you mentioned in February, and also to have the financial support of this board to make their travel possible. Does that capture the essence of the motion?
Great.
Okay, a seconder for that, and then I'll see if there's any further discussion.
Yeah, second.
Okay, Mayor seconding. Further discussion on that particular motion? Ms. Toth, I think you'll have to turn your microphone off. Yeah, thank you.
I think it's wise to attend and speak very concisely to what we specifically from the London Police Service Board want to add into the feedback process. I think we need to be aware that there's going to be more general feedback coming from the association level, and I think we have to add in the parts that is more specific to our situation and the kind of city that we are in London. So I think it's a good idea. I think covering the cost is appropriate. I do think we need to figure out what exactly we want to say, and with the timing, it looks like this is immediately after our next meeting. So hopefully we can, at our next meeting, agree on what it is we want to provide as feedback. I don't think we want Ms. Toth or myself just freewheeling in front of the committee. So I think if we can agree at the next meeting what we're going to add, I think that would be very helpful.
As much as it would be fun to see the two of you freewheeling in front of that committee, I'm sure I appreciate your feedback. And I know that Ms. Toth and Mayor, and I know I've provided some input, have already done that. Maybe I'll ask her to speak to that. And I think we would also be remiss, and I love, Councillor Salee, I love your comment that many things are Toronto-centric, and sometimes they forget us about us here out in the provincial countryside of London, Ontario, and other places like that. So I think no one would be more aware of those differences perhaps than the chief and our senior administration. So spending some time with him before we finalize our comments, I think would be very helpful. But Ms. Toth, you have some other comments on the work you've already done.
Thank you, Chair. And actually, you touched on exactly what I wanted to mention was that part of making sure that there's a local connection, and Councillor Salee has already suggested this to me, that we also reached out to the Police Association and make sure that we get their concerns about the act and be able to bring those forward as well. So we'll be speaking on the board's behalf, and then obviously we can speak with administration as well, bring any concerns they might have, bring concerns to the association, and all in one at the same time. I do have a draft of some of the concerns that I've identified, positives, negatives, neutrals, and I'll consolidate that with the information you've provided to me too, and pass that along to the rest of the board.
Do you feel there's a mechanism for you to circulate that, come up with a draft document? And do we have, I guess we have time, do we not meet on the 15th? And your trip to Toronto would be the 16th? Yeah, so we do have time for us to meet and discuss it as a board? Okay,
So,
wonderful.
sorry, just to clarify, the deadline to registration was that February date that I had set, it's February 16th. So you still do have time after that. I think it was like February 22nd is the meeting, the first one, and then the one in March.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, so we just have to register, which we could do immediately based on the motion we already have. Okay. So Jennifer, catch me up. I have now this motion for the not so freewheeling presentation on our by Ms. Toth and Councillor Helmer on that. Do I have a seconder for that?
Yeah.
And have a seconder. So I'm just looking for affirmation to vote in favor of that. I see nods and hands on both sides here. So thank you very much. Anything further on that topic as the people who are working on that? No? Okay, thank you very much. Item number 10, the board receives mandatory statistical reports as laid out in the Police Services Act. And one of these reports you'll see in front of you under item 10. So subject to any questions on that report to Deputy Chief Williams. Councillor Salee has a question.
Yes, thank you, and to the chair. And this is actually one of the things where I think our our new advocacy tactical team, when they go to the province, they could talk about it. I think it's one of the things that I had a concern with, which is the delays from SIU. And I just wanted, because I do have a concern for that, and I just wanted to state that for the public record. You know, when we have these long lengths, and I know I've shared this directly with the ministry yesterday, when SIU is investigating our members, and rightfully so, in those instances, that's fine. But when it, in my opinion, when it goes over for a year or extended periods of time, it becomes harmful for the community because, one, the community is waiting to see what's going on, what's the results, what has happened, is someone has done a wrongdoing or not. The second piece is I think it is a burdensome to our members who are trying to continue to do their work and having to wait and the stress involved with that. And the third piece, I think, is the lessons that are able to be learned from that incident aren't necessarily able to be achieved right away because we're waiting for the feedback from SIU. So I really wanted us, and I know the piece, to really stress to the board. I think that's a huge piece, and I think that sometimes it's getting missed in the bigger conversation with all the fast-moving pieces, with all the changes, and I just don't want that to be forgotten because I think it's a very problematic. And considering that now with the new powers and people being more educated and aware of their options, that you may see further complaints come up. And I just wanted to stress that there needs to be the resources there, and I've said that to the ministry, but I wanted to just put that on the floor here so that the board is understanding where I was. But that being said, I don't know if administration could speak on the SIU delays, or if they have a perspective that they choose to want to share. I know that they can say only so much, but I think it might be opportune.
I can tell you that the delays with the SIU have been a concern with not only our service, but most services throughout Ontario for a number of years. And we frequently follow up with the SIU on outstanding investigations, and we're just essentially told that we're not complete the investigation yet, and we're put into waiting mode without ever given a reason. So the SIU is certainly aware of the issue. Councillor Slee is bang on when he speaks to the stress it causes for our members, because quite often they are left in limbo under a dark cloud for quite often more than a year. In fact, like just off the top of my head, I know we have one outstanding investigation with a number of officers who were named in it that's hung out there for over a year. So it takes a great toll on them. And you're also accurate in that if there's any corrective action that we need to take as a service, whether it's with officer conduct or with our own procedures, we can't typically do that until the SIU investigation is complete. So it is a concern, but I can tell you when myself and Deputy Chief Longworth and the chief met with Justice Tulloch, we conveyed that to him, and it did form part of his recommendations. So, and I know he wrote to it. So it's a matter of how that plays out if those are implemented.
Thank you very much. Other comments, questions on this report before I look for a motion to receive it? Councillor Slee, would you like to make that motion?
Sure.
Thank you. Councillor Helmer, second. Any opposed? No. Thank you. And thank you for those reports. Item number 11 is also a mandatory board report. This is on now on the problem-oriented policing initiatives within our service. So subject to any questions of the deputy again on this particular one. I think I saw some changes in numbers there because this unit used to handle our human trafficking work on an ad hoc basis, and now that is in a full-time unit. So I see some of the dynamics in terms of the kind of charges coming out of there is changing, and I think that's the underlying, reason why. I bet they're glad to be back to full strength on what they're doing out there. Okay. Express our appreciation then for that report to Sergeant Elliott, and I'll look for a motion to receive that report. Councillor Slee, seconded by the mayor. Any opposed? Thank you. Item number 12, I have a revenue offsetting personnel costs, and for the benefit of new members who may not have seen this report, it's probably self-evident that we receive funds from provincial and federal government levels for specific projects that I see now amounts to about, it's over $6 million in combination, as I see there. And I think one of the usual questions is whether or not, since it's a significant part of our budget, if there's any risk to any of those funding envelopes as we move into the future.
I think because it is ministry funding, they're always subject to some element of risk because they're not guaranteed into perpetuity and they're at the whim of the government at the time. But we do have confirmation. You'll see on the contract expiry dates, some of those have either just passed or are coming up in the end of the provincial fiscal year this year. We have had conversations with the ministry on those specific contracts and they will be renewed. There's no indication they're going to terminate them. The first three you see on the first page have been the subject of some conversation over the last year and a half, 2 years. And what the ministry is talking about is those three grant opportunities that fund, in essence, the memo talks about 77 positions. Those are partially funded positions, but those three grant opportunities alone fully fund 26 positions within the organization. So what the ministry is talking about is wrapping those all up into one new grant opportunity, and they've been calling it the the Policing Effectiveness and Modernization Grant. And the criteria for the grant is kind of going along the lines of the ministry's direction on community safety and well-being. So we've had conversations internally as to how we're going to approach that when that funding outline changes and how we're going to adapt to that. They've allowed us last year and again this year the opportunity to still continue to apply for these grants, but we know on the horizon that criteria may change and we'll adapt to it as we need to.
Thank you, Deputy. I have a question from Councillor Slee.
Thank you, and Chair. Through you to administration. My question was specifically around the court prisoners, security officers. How much of that does it cover that line item for our service?
Are you talking about the court grant on the second page? There's two court, the court prisoner securities on page 2, the back of, yeah. I'm not fully sure. I think it's, none of these grants are full cost recoveries. But in this particular case, I believe that one is an invoiced based on our services we provide. But it's still not at 100% dollar for dollar. I don't know. I don't have the numbers right in front of me as to what the amount is because each one of these grants have different funding envelopes. For instance, the provincial anti-terrorism grant, we just got notification at the end of last year that the ministry has bumped that up and it's almost to the point of a full true cost recovery. All the rest are at varying degrees and the commitment from the ministry is they're going to continue to try and make them full cost recovery, but we're not there yet. We're a long way off.
So just my 2 cents then, I think that should be 100% by the province. So I'm not sure where my opportunity to say that is, but I'll just say that now. Maybe someone will listen, or maybe I'll send them the YouTube link after.
I think, yeah, to the chief in a sec. I think that was one of the questions, for instance, in the Police Services Act I had. I know that local police services it's been a contentious issue that the province should just write the check for those salaries, period. So anyway, Chief.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Councillor Salee. It's been a point of contention for many years since the funding started, probably 7 years ago, because it was never fully funded. It was based on this ratio. And because of our municipality having the courthouse here, obviously, and the transportation of those individuals to EMDC, that it falls on us to provide those services. But the cost has never been really updated. I know they did an adjustment, I think about 2 years ago. And again, it still hasn't come up to what the current salaries are even for providing that service. But it has been brought up at various levels over the years to increase that funding.
Sorry, just one more point. Chair, and sorry to throw this last minute up here, but I think because it's been going on for some years, and I know in the past the chief has mentioned it to me as well, I think it would probably be best that the board maybe at some point writes a letter and copies the umbrella organizations that we work with, as well as sending it directly to the ministry, specific to our situation. So in consultation, a letter perhaps with the administration to say, this is the impact. It's housed in our city, but we're taking the bulk of it, and to kind of really essentially demand those funds be made 100%. So I want to move a letter and hopefully have some support.
I see support for that around the table, and Jennifer, perhaps if I saw one hand, it was the mayor's.
Who pays for the stamp?
Thank Thank you, Councillor. So I think I don't yet have a motion, Jen, correct me if I'm wrong, unless there are any other questions, just for the receipt, move to the receipt receive this report. Okay, Councillor Slee, I hear, and then seconded, I think I saw the mayor again, and I see nodding heads in approval of that. Thank you very much, and thank you for the background on the allocation of those costs from the administration. This is really item number 13, a very nice motion coming forward. As the public will know, or maybe they don't, so we should make them aware of the fact that February is Black History Month. The London Police Service, for as long as I can remember, many years, 5 or 6 years now, has held a specific Black History Month event at headquarters, and at that time given out the Louis Corre Trailblazer Award for Youth. So not only do we talk about Black History Month, and Councillor Slee and I were talking about this, there's one thing to talk about things, but there's another thing to take action. And one of the actions that comes out of this is some sponsorship of students, and the LPA, the London Police Association, supports that, and they ask us to join in them and do that, and we are looking now for $500 support based on a request from our diversity officer to do that again this year. So I guess I'd look for a motion to that effect, subject to any questions or comments. Councillor? Motion?
No, moving it, yep.
Motion, thank you. Second for that, Mayor, in favor of that. And do we have the date of that in here? Or February 23rd. So we should also publish the date that the event is February 23rd at police headquarters. And I usually think it's beginning at about 6 p.m. in the evening, and people can look for more information about that. It's a wonderful event. Item number 14, Chief, you wanted to speak to this, and it's always a tongue twister, so I'm just going to practice again and see if I can get the name of this committee right. It's the Community London Police Service Collaboration and Partnership Working Group. And you have some recommendations that are coming out that. I know that Councillor Slee and you started that committee about a year ago, maybe a little more than a year ago, and positive things have come out of it, so let's hear about them today.
It was actually Councillor Slee that named this working group. He wanted to make it overly complicated, but anyways, actually it started probably in October of 2016, and then we finally began to meet as a group in January of 2017, and over the 10 months working with about the 15 members within our community on this, a lot of recommendations came up, and I provided an update to the board at the end of 2017 on some of those recommendations, and at that time said the biggest chunk of the work was left to be done, which is the training that had been recommended by this group. So there has been a bit of a challenge because there's so much mandated training that officers have to do in a limited amount of time, and our diversity officer, Constable Teresa Lott, has been very busy on trying to get in little bits and pieces as she can, but we finally got to the point that we've included a very large portion of our in-service training to that, and it started on January 2nd of this year with the focus from the Black community and Mr. Leroy Hibbert, who's been coming into our building to provide that training on a weekly basis for all sworn and civilian members of our service. So we have some other slots now that have been set aside for LGBTQ2 communities and for First Nations to also come in and provide training. So I just wanted to bring that, an update to the board on where we are with that.
Thank you, Chief. I remember it was really instrumental, very helpful to me when board members were able to attend the training for the regulated interactions and the new implementation of those regulations. And I don't think the board wants to sit on all the training the officers do, but some that have policy implications or whatever, it might be helpful to us. Is there an opportunity for us to sit in on those training sessions or to have Mr. Hibbert come and share that with us at some level?
With Mr. Hibbert coming to do the training, I think it would be a great opportunity for the board to hear the actual training. The numbers, we do have space sometimes becomes an issue with how many people we can put in the classroom, but we can also look at that as an opportunity as well. One of the other things that we're doing, if it doesn't fit into the board's schedule, is we're going to be taping the training. So that, as there are members that might be off through the 24 weeks that it takes to get everyone through the training for a variety of reasons, as well as, new members that haven't even started with our organization, that we want to have a library of this training available for them as well. So if the board is interested, I can speak with Mr. Hibbert to see if he'd be willing to come to one of the training sessions and provide, or one of the board meetings to provide the training to them.
Okay, maybe we can work. And
It's
I
about an
see-
hour, so.
I was just going to ask you how long it was, and I see, I'm not used to looking up to see who's coming into our meetings, so I should say welcome to the people who are there, and I see Teresa a lot is there. By the way, we just passed the $500 request for the awards that you requested, so you're welcome. Councillor Salee, you have something to add there?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I guess her diversity ears were tingling, so and then she came in right at that time, so that was great. So just to take members back, I think just for the benefit of the public, so that they can follow along with this, because I know this part wasn't widely communicated with the greater community. Just some of the work that came out from this long titled name working group that I have co-chair with the chief. But I just wanted to stress to the members of the public that why it was really beneficial, because it was really grassroots, and I think, in my opinion, it was an unprecedented kind of approach to training. And I don't think any police service that I'm aware of, when doing my homework and checking, has kind of headed in this direction. Because I know we've had some difficult conversations recently here locally, and people are asking where we at with training, and I actually think we're on the forefront. I know there might be some things that seem negative right now, but I believe strongly that we are leading. And why I say this is because myself and Chief Pear were facilitating this working group. They led us, they said this is where we need to go and this is where we should go. And at no time was there any resistance that was met, and the chief was supportive on quite a few of those fronts, if not actually all those fronts, as well as taking out tangible things that have actually produced results for our community. I know we've become one of the few police services that have removed the initial ATS fees associated with applying, which if you know about diverse communities, sometimes there is financial barriers to applying to policing. And from my understanding, that has opened the door for a lot of applicants from across Ontario, and has even made it more attractive for people to want to apply to our police force. So I think that was an important piece to mention. The other part that I did want to stress, just for the benefit of the community, is the makeup of the group was the gender balance was there. We had representation with sexual orientation, First Nations communities, the Black community. There was no one that was missed at that table, and we had a high interest, and so members were all at that table, and I think we did a really great job. And I think other police services can actually learn from what we're doing here. And I think I'm very appreciative to learn that the chief is working on a very aggressive timeline. I recognize the challenges they have with all the training that is being put on them. And I think people sometimes forget that, and I know the community wants to see action as soon as possible, and so do I, but it recognizes that sometimes they have mandated training that comes from the province, but the chief is actually working aggressively on that timeline. I wanted him to kind of maybe touch on that, and kind of tell us what the classroom sizes are looking at and what's the kind of the timeline, because from, I think, with our previous conversations, it's pretty aggressive.
So our in-service training, it takes 24 days or dates to get all our members through the training, and it's based on not stripping the street. We wish we could close down for a day and provide all the training, but it's not always possible. So we have to work around that piece. So it depends on the day of, what's going on in the training, because if specific to use of force, obviously there needs to be a ratio of trainer to people being trained. But with the in-classroom, so what's being provided by Mr. Hibbert, it opens up that we can fill the room. So we've mandated it for all our civilian, all our cadets, all the sworn members, including senior officers. Have to attend this training over the next 24 days, or 24 dates, I should say. It'll take us starting on January 2nd, and we end somewhere around the middle of June before all the training and all the members will be through. So I wish it could happen quicker, and I'm going to steal a line that I got from Constable Ottawa once before. It's about planting a seed, and sometimes you wake up in the next morning hoping that there's a plant there, but sometimes it just take a little time to get there. So that's the process that we're using with the diversity training, that we've made this commitment to do this training, and it's not one time, but it's continuous to try to build it into our regular curriculum. So, and if I could, I also forgot to mention that board member Susan Toth, prior to being on the board, was actually on this community working group, as was Constable Lott and Marcel Marcelin, who actually, used to work for the police department, and now working at the city. So, Isn't he? I don't know. Who knows? He's all over the place, but he was part of this. And also, you know, Marcel Marcelin for 7 years spent in the position of a diversity officer and provided extensive training to our members on diversity, you know, that he gathered across the province, working with human rights, working with the police college. So I just wanted to give credit to those members that also were part of this group in bringing that forward, so.
And Chair, just to wrap up, because I think it's another important piece, because I know, I guess, the community has asked, and I think it's something that shouldn't be missed. But all the trainers are external, not to say that there's not people who have a wealth of knowledge, but I think it's important. I know the chief has made that commitment, and the board has said that in the past, to have those external trainers, like, for example, Leroy Hibbert's leading this. And I don't want to try to guess who the other names are, but I know for, you know, the First Nations training, the LGBTQ training, those are people who are known entities in our community who have the grassroots support and are leaders in our community on those fronts. And I think that's an important piece to stress, that the training is being delivered by people who have that credibility in the community to deliver, in hopes that we have a more positive relationship with the communities that we serve.
Thank you. Thank you very much for all of that work. And I feel like there's a theme here that London can actually come up with something that may not have originated in the GTA. And there seems to be a theme on that at today's meeting. So congratulations to us. Maybe that was one of the themes that was at that breakfast I was at the other morning there. So I still think we're devoid of a motion to receive that report from the, so I'll, Councillor Salee, nicely done since you're on that committee, and seconded by Ms. Toth, and support, I assume, from the rest of the board members. Yeah, thank you very much. I think I'm moving now into other business, and that is a motion to receive and adopt the minutes from the public portion of the special board meeting from December 21st. So I'll look for a motion to receive and adopt those minutes. And Councillor Helmer, you were at that one, so yes, you can you can move that, and Councillor Salee second. Any opposed? If there's nothing else, I see that I have about a half an hour left to say a few words. Actually, someone wise once said to me, if you want me to speak for an hour, I can start right now. If you want me to speak for 5 minutes, I'll have to think about it for a little bit. So fortunately for board members, I have had some time to think about it. And I really did want to say before I vacate this chair, not this particular chair that I've now occupied for about an hour at council chambers, but the role as chair for the last 3 years, to say a few thank yous. And first, I'd like to start with the executive team. You know, leaders of other police services have sought me out at meetings to tell me that the London Police Service is one of the most highly respected services in our province. And I think we all know that a commitment to such excellence starts with the leadership team in the executive office. Chief Perry, John, I've appreciated your commitment to accountability, transparency, and collaborative ways of dealing with sensitive matters, such as sex assault cases and diversity training that was mentioned this morning. Mark Twain once said, "The problem with common sense is that it's not very common anymore." So I commend you for being an exception. You deliver honest and forthright opinions to our board, partners in the community, and when fielding questions in community consultations. They aren't always popular answers, but they're honest and straightforward answers, and I know you stand by the convictions of your feelings and your experience. So thank you for answering your unswerving commitment to this community and the men and women who serve in this police service. It's been an honor to work with you. And to your right, Deputy Chief Williams, Steve, you've always been a great source of institutional knowledge and practical advice whenever I came and needed to consult with you. Your leadership for this service with respect to peer-reviewed research and evidence policing that you're now moving forward with on our behalf is the way of the future. Deputy Chief Longworth, Daryl, wasn't easy to be hired into your role as an outsider, but you quickly gained the respect of the board, your colleagues and members, and we're going to have to quit referring to you as the new guy in the executive office, because it seems like you've always been there already. Your community outreach work, witnessed the work that you did last night. I know the work on the situation tables, hubs in our community are great examples of proactive outreach to our community members. Also a way of looking at future policing models in terms of reaching out. I've always considered the chief and his executive team my first stop for information and ideas on issues that face the board. They're well informed, and I have to admit, usually one step ahead of us on most of the issues that we as a board believe are important. The delivery of excellent service happens through the day-to-day work of sworn and civilian members. I recall reading a book about John DeLorean. Now we'll forget his little fiasco in Ireland for those of you who followed his exploits. But early on in his career, he took over as manager of one of the troubled divisions of General Motors in terms of production. And he adopted information gathering process he called touring. And he said he came from administration and he needed to spend time with the frontline engineers and assembly teams to understand what was needed. And he attributed his successful management and turnaround of that division to the knowledge he gained through touring. I'd encourage board members to do more touring on the front lines, especially those of you who are new board members. Ride-alongs with a patrol officer are great, and they're definitely the first step. But also spend time with other units to appreciate the wide range of work in the service. I learned so much by watching the work of 911 Communication Center employees, understanding how major case files are handled, walking on a winter day with the foot patrol in the Old East Village, spending an evening in cells, I want to add on the right side of the door. I remember being out dropping clues for the K-9 unit on a really rainy day one fall. And of course, riding along with the human trafficking projects and the Persons at Risk program helped me to learn more about what help is being provided by this police service to some of the most vulnerable women in our community. As one seasoned officer once told me, sometimes we play the enforcement role and sometimes we lend a helping hand. We do whatever it takes to resolve the situation. To the senior officers, and I'm sorry they aren't here today, so please pass along my comments. You must sometimes feel like the ham in the ham sandwich, not in the spotlight that shines on the executive and not on the front lines where you can take quiet satisfaction in the hands-on tasks that completed on your shift. Yet you're the glue that holds the organization together, putting executive orders into action, translating frontline needs back to the executive. You're the future executives of the London Police Service. I'm sorry our new meeting venue makes it more difficult for new board members to get to know you, as I believe I have in the past. And I trust we'll find ways of correcting that in the future. I also want to mention, and please pass my comments along to Rick Robson and Dave Gilmore of the London Police Association. Seeds for the positive relationship were planted through negotiations handled by former board member Paul Pilato. And I wonder if people are aware that Chief Perry and I were invited to speak at the opening of the Ontario Police Association's meeting last fall. And I understand that having a chief of police and a member of the board speak to the associations is quite unprecedented. And they spoke of the very positive relationship that has been developed here in the last few years. Just like the front officers I quoted earlier about doing whatever it takes to resolve a situation, is also an apt description of the support and guidance this board receives from our administrator, Jennifer Foster. Incoming Chair Salee and Vice Chair Toth, you'll come to appreciate and rely on Jennifer as a source of institutional knowledge and her dedication to giving 110, 120, 150% in everything she does for the work of this board. And finally, to my board colleagues, many of the members of this board are quite new, and I'm really just getting to know some of you. However, I can already see, and I think this meeting today is witness to the fact, and the meeting that we had earlier in camera meeting that you didn't get to see. I can see that you bring new voices, ideas, and energy to the work of our board. You ask questions that make us feel uncomfortable, and that's a good thing. Police service boards and services are being asked to be more accountable, transparent to the communities they serve. Your questions help to make that happen. But looking forward, I think we always have to remember that asking a question doesn't mean jumping to one answer or making policy on the fly. And I think we've seen some sound thoughts about how to move forward. Some questions require a swift response, and others may benefit more from taking time to weigh the evidence, hear other perspectives, and fully consider the downsides of making a change or jumping ahead to a specific answer too quickly. The public will become aware of some initiatives we discussed earlier this morning on topics in which case that is exactly the time and paced consideration is going to happen. And I find it fearful when I see examples of things like the recent decision, in my opinion, and just based on what I see in the press, of the Toronto School Board in terms of secondary school resource officers as an example. From what I read in the press, the board eliminated a program that had been running for many years based on some anecdotal evidence, and yet very quickly after that found well-designed research that pointed to the benefits of those programs for the majority of students and the presence of police in their schools. So I think as thinking people, and I see evidence of that today, I think we need to challenge ourselves as board members to be collaborative enough, patient enough, and creative enough to find answers that respect evidence-based research, the experience of frontline workers, and the voices of frontline people. And I think trying to find that balance is a difficult job, but I think we're up to it in the future, and I wish this board every luck and good wish in doing that. And so, final few words, once again, to the incoming chair and vice chair. I wish you well in your new responsibilities and look forward to assisting you any way I can in the next few months while I'm still on the board. Thank you very much for all you have done and will do in the future, and I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just thought, as a new incoming chair, I thought I'd just thank you on, I guess I can't thank you today, but I guess in the future, speaking in the future, thank you on behalf of this board for your years of service. I believe you have 6, correct?
Coming to 8.
Coming to 8 years, okay. So
Yeah.
that's like a lot of my life. So thank you for that. And, you know, wishing you all the best in your future endeavors. And I just wanted to express that on behalf of the board, and I'm sure open it up to the floor if anyone else wanted to speak.
Thank you, Councillor. I look for, oh,
You can't get away that easily, Chair. I look around the horseshoe and I see myself as the longest serving board member outside of the chair. And I want to reflect back quickly on the past 3+ years of serving on this board under your leadership. And the dedication that you have brought to this role is remarkable. The number of hours that you spend in a week and in a month outside of the board meeting, doing board business, providing leadership to the administration, and providing your own, conducting your own research is also remarkable. I'm not sure if everyone around this horseshoe recognizes that Chair Eberhard, while serving in this critical role in our community, was also completing her PhD. And again, a task that takes a significant amount of focus, time, and energy. And I think that work, many times over the past 3+ years, came secondary to your commitment to leading the London Police Service Board. And there have been a number of issues over the past 3 years that you've navigated with grace, that you've navigated with professionalism. And if I could pick 3 adjectives to describe your leadership style: calm, cool, and collected. And I think that many, many times over the past 3 years, that's exactly what this organization and what this police service board has needed. And so I guess as the second longest serving member sitting around this horseshoe, I want to thank you very much for your leadership. And I also want to let you know that as I look forward to the future, I think that you'll find the demands that are placed on past chair to be quite satisfactory.
Thank you very much for those kind words, Mayor. My husband often says sometimes people are, to your comments, are like a duck, calm and cool on the surface, but paddling like hell underneath. So I'll look for a motion. Sorry.
One more.
Okay.
Just one more. I was reflecting back to the late 2014, 2015 during an interview for a chief, and when you offered me the position, how you said this, you figured the next couple of years would be rather easy as chair of the London Police Services Board. So, but, you know, I do have to thank you for, you know, it wasn't an easy last 3 years, quite frankly, with much of the challenges, adversity that this police services has faced in the board. But, you know, we could always count on you to reach out during a challenging time. We could count on you for your support and advocacy, but we could also count on you to point us in a direction that you felt was necessary to go. And it may not have been easy, but you were up for the challenge during that period of time. I just wanted to thank you on behalf of the members of the London Police Service.
Thank you very much, Chief. Thank you. Wow, great, dry eyes, and we got through that. So I'll look for a motion now to adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much. Councillor Hemler, Salee, all in favor. And I'll remind our board members that we have a little bit of other business to finish in the next room in camera. And we can use the same lounge. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the team who was here helping us with the technology on this. I assume that all our friends and relatives have been able to watch this and will be able to watch it should they want to do that, and members of the community. And again, our thank you to the people who were here today in the audience. Yeah, members, 10-minute recess before we reconvene. Thanks, Councillor.